What's up everybody, hope you're having an amazing day so far. I'm your host Phil, and in today's video we're going to check out 10 different power amps. But first, let's roll the intro clip. Alright, before we actually get into today's topic or today's video, I first want to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you who commented, who watched videos, engaged, or in any shape or form helped me with the channel in 2024. To all of you, Happy New Year, by the way. 2024 was an amazing year. I did like 30 uploads and I got 100,000 or nearly 100,000 views, over 600 new subscribers, 2,500 likes, 400 comments. There's a few different other numbers out there on the Wrapped, which you get by YouTube. Was super successful year. Thank you so much for everybody being a part of this journey. It also paid a little bit off. You know, I could invest into a new webcam over here, and I'm actually now buying a little bit new lighting over here. So the YouTube ad revenue which I'm getting is not that much. It's a few $100, but it definitely helps out and also motivates me to kind of push forward to this, to better up the studio step by step, in order to bring you better content. So this is super cool. I'm super excited for what 2025 is going to bring to the table, and I hope that you all are going to be along for the ride. So with that out of the way, let's get straight into the first video of 2025. Power amps, they are a very, very important, crucial part of the overall tone of your guitar amplifier. Or are they actually? I was very curious to answer this question for myself because there's so much contradicting information which you can find online, and I do have a pretty decent collection of guitar amplifiers and power amps and whatnot over here at my, man cave home studio place. So I just thought for myself, why not take you along the ride while I find out the answers onto that question. This video was mainly inspired right after I did the initial review on the Orange Pedal Baby 100 power amplifier, which I got borrowed by Paul Bradshaw. Thanks again for that one. Yeah, I was really curious to find out the differences between the Orange Pedal Baby 100 and different alternatives on the market. For example, the Harley Benton GPA 100, and I just, cranked it up, took this to a complete overkill, and I basically made a comparison of all of the power amps which I have over here. So I got here, I think, 7 tube amplifiers currently at the moment. We're going to list them, or we're going to take a look at them in a moment over here, and then I think I got 3 dedicated guitar power amplifiers, and as an extra bonus, this is basically number 11, I also added my vintage hi-fi Pioneer SA 9500 power amplifier. So all in all, there's going to be 11 different power amplifiers which we're going to put here to the test. Let me take you first through the test setup so that there's no misunderstanding what we're actually listening to. So the riff you're about to hear being played through the power amps is basically a thrash noodling riff which I use basically as my reference riff whenever it comes to reamping and setting up the amplifiers in my home studio arrangement over here. That reference riff is then running through a neural amp model amp capture, which we're going to talk about in a moment. That then goes into the Lele P-Split 3 as a reamp box over here. I already made a dedicated video on the channel showcasing how awesome of a unit that is. That then goes into a high quality buffer, in my case, the buffer of the Fortune Tempest boost or overdrive, and that then goes into the respective power amp, either through the power amp's input or the effects return or the power amp insert of the respective amplifier. Out of the power amplifier, we're then sending the signal onto the ToneHound do-it-yourself reactive load box, which has an impedance curve which is very much akin to that of an V30 with a slight greenback characteristic, I would say. That then goes back into the interface, and from there on, I'm using a greenback impulse response from Celestion Digital. I purposely went the way with going with the reactive load box in this case because it's not about the best sounding thing, but we want to have actually, accurate results where we always can have a base of comparison, and using the reactive load box compared to the cabinet and miking up, make sure that there's absolutely zero room for any difference in regard of, mic setup, touching the microphones when moving stuff around, that kind of stuff. I wanted to avoid that completely, so therefore I went with the reactive load box. The preamp sound which you're about to hear is coming from a neural amp modeler amp capture which I made of my EVH5153 on the Blue Channel, boosted by a Lichtlam Audio King and Yellow boost pedal. Now, If you like the tone which you're hearing, I got some captures for purchase. They're going to be on my Ko-fi page over here. So if you go down to the description of this video or look at this link over here, it's going to be ko-fi.com/pipris. There's going to be an online shop for digital goods, and there you can find for Neural Amp Modeler, for TONEX, for KEMPER Profiler, and for the STL Tones Tracer for $10. The entire pack of that respective Blue Channel with a ton of different boosts and also the unboosted amplifier. There's going to be boosted amp captures of stuff like the Deadweld audio duality of, the Lichtam Audio King in Yellow, 14 Tempest, among some other classics like the Maxon OD808, Boss SD1, and some other pedals which I got over here in my collection. There's going to be photos included so that you can see that I really got the gear which I'm capturing. You're going to see the actual settings of the pedals on that photo, and as well the settings of the amplifier on the respective photo. And for convenience, I also included my Trinity IR pack, which is free on TONEX available, but there you have everything in one pack. And for the KEMPER players, I also already converted those impulse responses to the KEMPER CAD profiles, or whatever you call them, so that you really can go ahead and make some awesome thrash metal tones with these packs over here. I got a ton of other packs already in the making, but I first want to see if there's enough interest, if there's any reception at all in the market for this kind of, boosted brutality packs, which I offer. So yeah, just to show the channel a little bit love, go ahead, do yourself some good for the new year. Go down below to the ko-fi.com/pipris site, get into the shop and grab yourself an awesome high gain pack. And with that, let's move over back to the power amp shootout. So in the upcoming audio samples, what you're first going to hear is all of the power amps one by one. So we're going to have that reference track, which I just talked about, and we're going to run that through all of the power amps. It's going to take around about 1 minute or so for each and every power amp so that you really get the feel of what that power amp sounds like. And the next segment then afterwards, after a short introduction, we're then going to have hard A-B cuts, or basically a looped riff, where you can have an easier distinguishing between the actual power amps. But everything will be set up with timestamps in the description so that you get immediate insight. With that out of the way, let's roll those audio samples. So those were the single recordings, one played after another. There are quite some differences already which you can, assess and which you can evaluate. However, let's go over to having basically the loop of the riff and then just playing through the different power amps so that we have like a hard cut A/B comparison. That was a pretty interesting listening experiment. At least I personally thought so when I did all of the recordings and listened back to back to them. There were a few trends which we can certainly pin down. And yeah, looking at this a little bit further, a little bit deeper into the rabbit hole, we can also make some clear assessments on what is happening over there. And then based on that, make some speculations on why this is happening. Now, I did frequency responses for all of the power amps over here, just a clean sweep through the respective signal chain, which I just talked about on the relevant amplifiers. And this is then what we get. So this is basically all of the frequency response graphs at once. What I tried to do is I initially panned out so that at 1 kilohertz, we got this tilting point where basically the amplitude of all the signals or of all the frequency graphs are the same. This did not work that good. Instead, it kind of shifted to 1.1 kilohertz, but this is good enough to make a little bit of a speculation. One thing which I want to mention over here is that this is no normative identifier. This is not something which you can really set up to a standard and then make, scientific conclusions out of this. We only can basically make the measurements, try to match them up level-wise, and then speculate a little bit around what is different between tube amplifiers and solid-state amplifiers and how the different tube amplifiers react differently to each other. So this is kind of a speculative thing, but I think that we can back this up through the frequency graphs, and whatever issues I might have, like thought-wise, let me know down below in the comments. In the end, I'm just a dude in his man cave doing some funny experiments. Okay, you can clearly see that there's a trend where some of these frequency response graphs have like resonance peaks and then also troughs in the mid, and then they go upward again on the higher frequencies in different fashions. So you can see here, for example, like this nice, let's say, bathtub curve, which we got over here, and then some of those frequency graphs like the green one, the wiggly one, over here goes like in that high slope. So let's clear all of them, and then let's select first off the EVH5153. The 5153 has exactly this, you know, like this trough in the mid, the resonance peak around 78 hertz, and then it goes slowly up, you know, like it doesn't have this bathtub curve where it then in the end goes also down, but it actually has like this slow slope which is then going upward and never stops. If you compare this to like a Marshall like circuit, like from the Marshall JVM-JS, here, the resonance peak is shifted a little bit higher and it falls off a little bit earlier. The trough is bigger in the mids, but therefore the high frequency is getting up way quicker, but then at some point when it reaches its peak, then falls off. This peak over here, by the way, is somewhere around 7 kilohertz, which is pretty much the nasty frequency which the other John Brown points out in his speaker videos. And this is very typical for the Marshall presence range. So if you dial that in too strongly, then you get kind of that very fizzy, anemic thing going on. And I think this is exactly what's going on over here. While when you really crank up the presence of the EVH or any type of 5150, you're going to get this super harsh high-end spectrum. And I think this is shown pretty good over here in this frequency response over here. So let's go ahead and kind of compare groups of them. So I'm now going to go ahead and compare the EVH5153 against the PV6505 and the Bugera 6262. Funnily enough, if I take away the PV, I must say that the Bugera 6262, granted with a resonance mod, has a pretty similar slope like the EVH. So I could believe that this over here is maybe a little bit of a potentiometer tolerance. So if I set this up a little bit lower, then I would get a very, very similar curve over here, which is super interesting, to be honest, because I always thought when playing through the Bugera 6262 that it was a little bit closer to the EVH5150III than it was to my PV6505 Plus. So this would at least be part of the reason why this might be the case. Of course, the preamp is a little bit different on both amps. I am well aware of that, but the EQ which you set at the end, the equalization, which we're effectively doing by setting up resonance and presence, is super important for the overall perception of the tone which you're getting. So this is really interesting, at least in my personal opinion, and kind of backs up my feeling which I had when playing through these. So let's again add the PV6505, and you can see here that the trend in how they behave are all the same. So so all of them have that resonance peak, then it goes down in the mids, in that trough, and then there's a slow rise which never stops up into the high frequency spectrum. Next up, let's check out the, let's say, Marshall-like circuits. We're going to start with the Marshall JVM-JS, which has, you know, like a pretty decent generic curve, I would say. And then we're going to put in the Marshall TSL100, which has a higher resonance peak because of the deep switch, which adds like a real low-end rumble. However, the presence is not set that high. Now, granted, I did not like fully crank the presence and the resonance on the respective amplifiers. I always set them to where they sounded best in that particular setup. So there might be some room for improvement over here, but nonetheless, very interesting that we have, like, all in all, a pretty similar shape. So that means if you have a TSL 100 and you want to kind of get that Marshall power amp tone, then I would assume that you can easily get that, and it would be not virtually the same, but very similar to what the JVM Joe Satriani offers over here. Let's look at the Bugera, sorry, not the Bugera 333, but the Bugera 1990. Now this one looks completely different, and this is also very apparent when listening to it. It's a little bit more, I would say, balanced or neutral, not balanced, maybe neutral in its tone, and this is because the resonance is not that strong compared to the trough on the mids, and also the slope towards the highs is pretty slow rise, and then it kind of falls off slow, so it doesn't have like a harsh frequency peak going on over there. So, what else do we have? We got the Bugera 333. Let's compare that to the Bugera 6262 and the Bugera 1990. So you can see over here through the tight setting, I set it by the way to the tight setting, you can see that the high end is pretty high, the resonance peak is not that high, so therefore it does not get that low end rumble which the 62 would get, but it definitely is a different animal than the 1990. Also quite interesting to just look at these graphs, kind of learn a little bit and, you know, just kind of soak that in. Okay, Harley Benton Thunder 99. This is very interesting because I always think when you crank the Thunder 99, you get that strange mid-honk going on, and this is exactly what we're hearing over here. So everything above 2 kilohertz is kind of slowly progressing and falling off. And if I just, you know, if I just compare that this over here at 3 kilohertz and 2 kilohertz is the same, and then when I go over to 6 kilohertz, I already have a difference, a delta of nearly 1 decibel, and then it kind of takes off a little bit more. That makes a difference. That takes a lot of the high-end details of the air away and just leaves that nasty mid thing going on. And the same with the lows actually over here. So if you look over here, you know, you got a delta of 2 decibels at 50 hertz, and then it kind of slowly progresses upwards. Yeah. That's a weird thing. That's a weird power amp when cranked up. I'm not that much of a fan over here. Totally different story with the Harley Benton GPA 100, which is way smoother overall in its frequency response. So, of course, there is still the slight tilt. However, on the GPA 100, you have the EQs, which you can massively shift the tone with. So, when putting the low end over here, you can get something very similar to what the tube power amps have. I mean, it's kind of fake it until you make it type of deal, but still, you kind of get the deal over here. So this is way more linear. Let's take away the Thunder 99 and let's go ahead with the pedal, with the orange pedal baby over here. Here, the low end is shifting downward way more than on the GPA 100. Granted, I do have a little bit of headroom where I could crank this and put this a little bit more into a linear realm, but having the 3-band EQ on the GPA 100 makes this simply a more flexible unit than the Orange Pedal Baby, even though, and that I still stand by that, playing through the Orange Pedal Baby still was a ton of fun and made more fun than playing through the Harley Benton GPA 100. Don't know what's going on that one. And yeah, last but not least, we got the Pioneer SA 9500-2, and this one is super linear, you know, like compared to all of the other power amps, this is the most linear one, this is the most neutral sounding one. There was no EQ engaged on the power amp when I did the recording, and this shows, like, this had a stellar performance overall when we're speaking about neutral, you know, amplification, which is not necessarily what we always want to have, but in this case, this really worked out well. So yeah, this is like really interesting stuff in my opinion over here. And adding that, you get kind of a funny picture, and you're kind of seeing the overall picture with your eyes, and it kind of reflects to what I at least was hearing when I was listening to the demos. In the last video, I was looking at the distortion curves and making some speculations. I want to do that once again. I have to disclaim one thing. In the last video, I mentioned that Class D has lower THD, total harmonic distortion, than Class AB. I searched a little bit on the internet and I found out that was wrong, so sorry for that. You guys corrected me, and that's also exactly how it's supposed to run. You know, super important that we kind of get this stuff right, so thank you for that. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of take a look over here and speculate a little bit on the tube feel versus the solid state feel, which a lot of people are referring to why they prefer tubes over, you know, something solid state related. Now, if I look at, for example, the EVH5150, what really becomes apparent is that we have a nice fall off of the respective harmonics over here. So it's basically kind of the deal that the second harmonic is the highest one, then comes the third, then comes the fourth and the fifth. They're kind of then in that same realm, and then from there on it just gets kind of a mushed up thing. However, you have to see that the second harmonic is like 50 decibels below the actual signal, and from there on it just goes downward. So it kind of falls into the realm where it's just noise, or not really relevant for what we're hearing. So it doesn't matter if the fourth is higher than the fifth, or if the sixth is higher than the fifth, and so on and so forth. But it is surely interesting that there still is this, I wouldn't say cascading effect, but this fall-off effect. The same goes for a lot of different tube amplifiers, in fact. So when we're looking at the JVM, we get a very similar picture. Anything above at least 300 hertz is kind of reacting in that way, and anything below is kind of weird in when it comes to phase and stuff like that. So that might be accounted for when it comes to this portion over here. But you can see over here again this nice fall off of the different harmonics. Looking over on the Bulgara 333, we got a similar picture, although not that prominent, but still the second fundamental is the strongest. On the PV6505, that looks a little bit different, and I would love to understand why this is. Unfortunately, I do not know why this is the case. It could be something schematic-wise, so let's see if the Bulgara 6262 has that similar characteristics. It doesn't. It again has basically the second harmonic a little bit higher, but there is kind of a very prominent setup where the total harmonic distortion is definitely a little bit there. On the Marshall TSL, that's a lot, like compared to the other amplifiers, still very low when comparing the fundamental at round about, 30 decibels or 28 decibels, minus 28 decibels full scale, and then the second harmonic being somewhere around 70. So, it's still substantially lower. And then Harley Benton GPA, here it's kind of a complete mess going on over here, and this is basically where I was corrected that the total harmonic distortion perhaps is higher on this particular unit than on other stuff. On the Orange Pedal Baby, we can really see it very nicely planned out over here. However, over here the distance between those is also not that high. It's a little bit lower, like 5 decibels or something. Still doesn't matter that much in the grand picture, but it could be why that feels a little bit different. And on the Pioneer SA 9500, it sounds super neutral, but it also feels super neutral. And this could be part of the reason why there's like super low total harmonic distortion, which is great if you want to have like a very detailed resolution when it comes to listening to music, like classical instruments and stuff like that. I think the Pioneer SA 9500 excels actually when listening to very dense mixed classical music. At least that was what I heard in different forums. And yeah, this would explain why that, like, it's super pristine, it's super clean when it comes to amplifying the signal out. So this is also like a nice thing. We cannot learn that much out of looking out of this, but we can still speculate and just have fun looking at these curves and just enjoying the fruits of the labor. So yeah, with that out of the way, I would say let's get to the closing thoughts and conclusion section. So what learning can be gathered out of all of the data which I presented over here, both the frequency response graphs and the audio samples? I think it's best said with the phrasing, variety is a spice of life. It's solely overused, I understand that, but really, all of these amplifiers do sound unique in their own right, and that means that they all are an integral part of the design of the respective amplifier they are part of. And if you are interested in such a subject as amplifiers or power amplifiers and the differences between them, then you are very sensitive to those details which I pointed out, like where is the trough in the mids, where is the resonance, what is happening with the presence. And hopefully we kind of gathered enough knowledge to kind of build a broader base on at least some of the more common amplifier types. Now, let's say Marshall's 5150s, over here the 333 has its own thing going for itself, and also solid state amplifiers, some differences over there. I think, for example, the mid honkiness of the Thunder 99 how it sounds and how the graph looks like, it matches like 1-to-1. It's absolutely what you're seeing is what you're hearing. And that's really cool in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, the information's now out there. The cat is out of the bag, as we say in Germany. So do with that information whatever you will. I hope that this information still has helped you, or at least has entertained you. If you like what you see over here, if you like what I'm doing on this channel, please go to my Ko-fi page and buy yourself one of those amp capture packs of the EVH5150 on the Blue Channel, boosted with a ton of different boosts. There's a lot of stuff going on in those packs. You will not regret it, and you will do the channel some good, so I can kind of keep on building up the studio in order to get even more higher quality content to you. I hope you all had fun. I hope you all came wonderfully into 2025. I'm super excited for the upcoming year and want to wish you the best. If you like what you saw, again, like, comment, subscribe, do all of that stuff. See you in the next video. Until then, keep it metal.